Welcome to the Black Appalachian Coalition's podcast entitled BLAC Re-Membering, where we will bring to you the heavy and the hope across the Ohio River Valley. We want to remember who we are, where we've come from. We want to speak to the oral history of what we've done, what we've achieved. We want to speak to the ills that we have experienced while also finding solutions to those problems, those issues. We want to deal with the narrative that has kept us deeply rooted in despair. Now we want to punch through that narrative and stand up and say, we are remembering our Black past, and we are rooted, and we are here to stay. Welcome to Black Remembering. We hope that you find your place, your space, and your voice in this podcast.
Thank you for being here. I welcome you to the Black Remembering, Highlighting the Heavy and the Hope podcast. My name is Melanie Meade. I live in Clairton, Pennsylvania, in the Mon Valley region. And I would like to invite you to introduce yourself, state your name, and any organizations you work for or are affiliated with.
Well, thank you for having me. My name is Curtis Davon. I am here on behalf of Clean Water Action. I am the organizing director. I live on the Penhills Verona borderline, so not directly, but I still get the impacts of the air.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. It is unfortunate, but it is something that I feel like the African Americans in our community don't tend to focus on. And one of the reasons why I invited you on to the podcast is because I do see you highlighting the hope in the work that you do. So what are some of your thoughts on what you've seen in the Pittsburgh area and how it's changed with the violence versus what we see going on in the outer lying areas where they don't seem to be as organized?
I'll start with the bad first and I'll work my way with good. But on the bad side, unfortunately, the people that are committing the crimes are getting younger and younger. The reasons are becoming less and less known. In a nutshell, not to get philosophical, I work with air and water, trying to rid it of pollution, in addition to empowering communities. But as we kind of like try to make a parallel, one of the things that I deal with in trying to make a clean, better environment is lead. And that is something that directly contributes to aggressiveness, right? So it's already proven that lead literally disconnects the mind and body so that one cannot process or think through one's actions. For the good, I think it's good that there's more information. As I talk to our fellow youth, I try to meet them where they're at. And most folk know Nipsey Hussle, the marathon. And so a couple of things with that. I think most obvious, keep going. That's the overall takeaway from the marathon. If you don't give up and you just keep going, something will happen. Believe you me, especially if you do it in the right way, right? If you can do a lot in the wrong way and be messed up. But if you keep the faith, as they say, and put one foot in front of the other, or I guarantee something will happen. I can't tell you what, but something positive will happen. But also, I think it's important from the aspect of kind of the context to the marathon. And so the context to the marathon, I think, comes out in Nipsey's interviews. And so like one of his interviews, he had mentioned that one day coming up soon, and mind you, this was like an interview done in like 2017, it's already 2023 going on 2024. He had said something where the small man will be able to take over the big man But what he was alluding to and what I got out of it is, take media for example nowadays. Back in the day, we would only get statistics from, normally, not always, but normally a white man sitting behind a desk. We only get access to it on at what 4, 5, 6, and 11. But now, fast forward, we get news as quick as we could pick up our phones. Sometimes you can get news better than the news. And the scoop on some things in the sense of the jump, like I know before you. And then also, even though you reported on it, I still know more than you reported. So I think in that regard, a lot of things has changed. And as it relates to the environmental justice world and Nipsey Hussle, I think that's the beauty, right? So like the David could beat the Goliath in the sense of Philly Thrive, for example. They shut down one of the biggest refineries on the East Coast. So like when you put into the notion of something like putting the strictest restrictions on US steel, or whether that's removing US steel altogether. So, being able to stop things like that is most certainly possible nowadays, and that's with all due respect to people, back in the day, we stand on the backs of, all of our foremothers and fathers, whether that's the popular ones of Dr. King or the lesser known ones of Irene Morgan. Um, I think, it's important to acknowledge, those people that stood up and back in the day, in lieu of losing their job, but then also the people who didn't stand up in lieu of losing their job. As being an African American, I can understand both. I'm just trying to get by, and also, we got to stand up to make a say. What I'm trying to get at though is, we're getting proper thanks to them. Now is a day where the small person can really come together, and we can do whatever, long as we do it together.
Yes.
I say that the last thing I'd say on that is just, there's an African proverb where, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go together, go far, go together. So I think that's the notion we can have now, and we can do things.
Exactly. I'm always excited by your energy and your motivation. You're very inspirational inside of the heavy. And what I've noticed is we don't have too many researchers addressing the issues, the intersectionality of issues for us. So that's something that I feel like we have to educate our youth about, so that when they go to college, they can begin to look and see the intersectionality of different things. Like you said, lead in the water, lead in the soil, lead in your paint, and the housing issues. If it's a poor housing facility, then of course it's going to affect those living in it. And if they're living in air pollution, then that's a double whammy, and sometimes quadruple whammies when you add bad food, and that's what our community has been living with for the last 50 years. We don't have a grocery store. We only have Family Dollars, Rite Aids, and Dollar Generals, and our produce marketplace is open 3 to 4 days a week, and it closes at 3 p.m. So environmental justice is probably the least of their concerns, because they have so many other things that are more pressing at the table. And I know from talking to you previously, you mentioned your Big Mom, and I had a grandmother that was dear to my heart, and I was always with her and up under her. So I just felt like you sharing who Big Ma is to you, and how she played a dynamic role in your family in creating who you have become to stand with us in community to speak out against these injustices.
Yeah. So Big Ma is originally from Alabama. She told me many a times about her making custom root beer, and that's why she didn't want to drink it at the time. She had enough root beer, but fast forward, almost kind of similar to this is statewide. We're talking more citywide, but another flight. They left the South. The South migration to the North. They were a part of that. And by they, I also mean her husband, my great grandfather. But they migrated from Alabama, Birmingham, Alabama to be exact, to Philadelphia first, which is, I guess, if we had to have a Black capital in PA, I think it might would be Philly. I think it's safe to say that.
Absolutely.
But from there, they moved here to Pittsburgh, into the Homewood area, and I was actually surprised to find out after being told many a times that my great grandfather had built a house for her, which, shame on me for not believing at face value. But lo and behold, I looked it up and he did build it for her. But they moved into the house, and fast forward to, my grandma and my dad. And I just think, I almost think of, the name of or the nickname of our state, which is Keystone. But, if you actually think about what the keystone that they're referencing, which is, the building process, specifically where they would put the key brick to kind of connect everything, if you will. And it actually is shaped, kind of like, our state symbol. But I look at my big mom like that, she's the keystone to our family that kind of connected everybody there. And as they say, energy doesn't die. So the energy that she's held and bestowed throughout not just, my intermediate family, but the whole family definitely still exists and still helps guide me to this day.
Lovely. I'm always excited to hear about our ancestors and how they've impacted us. And like you said, they never leave. Their spirit energy is always with us and around us. And I believe that that is what allows us to continue this type of work, especially when faced up against walls that don't seem to want to fall so quickly. I remembered you also talking about how the communities were hit with various epidemics. As you know, Clareton right now has a cancer epidemic. 1 in 20 people are diagnosed with cancer. We have an asthma epidemic. And families change. Grandparents nowadays are possibly working 2 jobs, whereas you and I had a grandmother who was able to be at home. What do you think that dynamic, where do you think this issue arose in the African American family, so to speak, when you talk about us being a collective, as having access to Big Ma on a regular day, being at her house versus being at home? Do you see a change in our community with the way your families functioned then and how we're functioning now?
I would say, yeah, but from the perspective of, I want to use the word cohesion. Um, I think a nuclear family is ideal, but I know from, whether you're reading the Bible or the Quran or whatever floats your boat, I know even since those days, not every family household was nuclear, but yet folks still survived. So in lieu of saying nuclear, I'll just say cohesion. And by cohesion, I mean support systems built in within the family. For example, myself, growing up, it was just me and my dad, but then I had access to my grandma, my big mom, my aunt, cousins, close neighbors, those people that you're close with in the community that you call your cousin, but they really not, but your family knew they family maybe for 3 generations. So, I count all of that into being a collective, and the difference that I see now is that doesn't necessarily exist. Um, I feel like, unfortunately, not a lot of people get to see big malls. And it's kind of like a weird, ironic irony that is very, it touches your heart. And what I mean is, so like mothers are having kids at a younger rate, but they're not, husbands are not, and these women sometimes unfortunately are not living as long to turn into great grandfathers or to turn into big moms. Even with my own peer group, I'm in my middle 30s. Not everybody in my group knows what a big mom is. Like, what's that? They don't even know what their grandparents are. Here I am. I've been in a room with my dad, my aunt, my grandma, my great grandma, and her sister. Right. So like, I think number one, I think that's richness. But to tie it into the environmental justice community, like, well, why the why to it, right? Like, the what was like, what's the difference? But the why do you think what's separation? And I think part of what I do is I have to do research, and I found a very unfortunate, damning stat, which if you are not killed by gun violence by the age of 35, then you will die of some type of hypertension, heart disease. And so what that looks like is, with that mind frame of guns and heart disease, the next position to look at is the where are we living? Where does Big Ma live? Where do I live in relation to Big Ma? And the answer is not that far, but the total answer is we still in an environmental justice community, right? So we might be a little bit distanced from each other, but we're not distanced from the problem, the strike zone radius, if you will. And so what that means is we are the people that bear the brunt of things like PM 2.5, things like ozone, etc., things that have connections to type 2 diabetes. That might ring a bell in our community. Things that give way to hypertension, as I mentioned, but specifically stroke. I lost my grandmother and great grandmother to stroke, COPD. And so, we're not able to have that connection because like I said, if you do make it past 35, you're going to unfortunately pass away of some heart disease. And so that's what's happening. And in addition to, unfortunately, a third avenue that it continues with us in generations is, most of us, if we don't stay separate of Big Mom, Grandma, etc., we live in their house. And then so what the problem starts to occur is it can get into mothers. And so mothers can pass it to their unborn child. And so it can get in through their teeth. It can get in through their blood, and then it can be transferred through the umbilical cord. So, it's unfortunately, we got these factors at play that is kind of chipping at the nucleus, if you will, or the family structure that, is picking us apart.
Absolutely. And I know that one of the most recent studies had out of the School of Social Work, University of Pittsburgh School of Social Work, had announced that the average life expectancy for Black women is only 60 years old in Pittsburgh. And that was during a time when the world was hearing Pittsburgh was the most livable city. And so, here again, I just want to have you highlight the work you do in clean water and why you do it, because it is so vital. And to hear your why may inspire and encourage others. And I know that you enjoy this work, and I know that you're very dedicated. So I believe that you can definitely win us some leaders in this cause, because it's not a fight. It's a building. It's a process. And one of my mentor, Archbishop Marcia Dinkins, who is the founder of BLAC and Black Women Rising, would always say the African American culture has always been a sustainable culture. Everything that we've done, from sharing a cup of sugar, out of our 5-pound bag, we give 2 cups. We make sure that another person has what we don't have, or we would trade in order to make sure. If you needed someone to care for your child, another might need someone to care for their grandparent. That's who we were, in that cohesion, like you spoke of. And I do feel we have become separate from it, just as we become separate from nature, which is all the origins of our culture. So how do you feel the work that you're doing restores this? And I know I would say I feel restored just by being able to interview you. So I'm sure that your work is restorative, but if it isn't, please share, why you would think it isn't, and what should be done, or what the government can do to help you to make it more restorative.
So thank you for the compliment. That means a lot. I think that's the goal for all of us, is to have some type of impact, because I think that your experience is your expertise. To take it a little bit even more culture, look at the locks. Jadakiss and Styles P, Sheets Luke. Locks literally stands for living our experience, right? And sometimes, in our communities, when we talk about things, they refer to it as a rap. So I guess this would be my ode to the locks. But what I realized, or what I noticed, is the me in it is basically my why. So living off of my experience, seeing that how the environmental impacts impacted my great grandma, my big mom, or my grandma, or my grandfather, who lived in Gary, Indiana, which is a city that was strictly made just because of U.S. Steel and the business that they want to do there. Passed away of COPD. And so, like, when I was starting to make these connections and seeing how everything, that essentially either took away the ones that I loved, or maybe might be the cause of some of the problems that we deal with in society today as a culture. I started looking at the avenue and the field different. It's seen a whole new atmosphere and a way to take it. And so I think if folks were more conscious about approaching this category of life, or way, or really it's a way, it's a way of health and returning. If folks will return to that way, I feel like think green for green, and not green just in the typical money sense, but green in the sense of health, green in the sense of, just feeling good, wellness. And so I think we would get all of those restorative things if we would go to that. The how does my work kind of operate in a restorative space? I think it does. First and foremost, I want to put that out there. And I just came up with my 2-year review, and very fortunate and happy to be able at least to work another year. So the way that I think that it's restorative is, as an African American male, I don't see too many African Americans, let alone males. I see more females than males, which is great to see anybody. But my point that I'm getting at is, that's one of the things that I try to do, is to get people of color to come out to public comment periods, to give public comment, so that their voices are heard, because those things are used. I know a lot of people in our culture try to, doubt that process, and they'll say like it doesn't work, or it's really such a such. I'm pretty sure we all know that person and heard that thing. But I think what's more important here is two things, and one of them is what Grandma shared with me. It's really them betting against us, you. You know, I heard there's an African proverb, "I" means we, so we, um, where they are basically saying, "Oh well, if you want to change it, it's here, but I bet you can't gather all the people that you need to say something." And part of that is systematic from, the pollution that disassociates our mind from our body. And some of it is this holding us down. But, if we take that challenge, take them up on that bet, as, folks in our culture say nowadays, bet. Um, I think, we can, going back to the Nipsey Hussle thing, be able to have the little man, the David, beat the Goliath. But then also, grandma, once told me, just don't want to stand for evil. So sometimes you got to pick the less of the worst evils. And so, even though what I'm getting at is you might not believe in the process, but think about the alternative, which is not saying anything and then still expecting the same demand and change, where you're a little bit farther from getting that demand and change versus if we all could come together collectively to, as the Black National Anthem says, lift every voice, so that we could do the David versus Goliath thing, mimic the Philly Thrive thing where they shut down the largest refinery on the East Coast. So I believe it's a work in progress. Definitely need more people to work with clean water to sign up for public comment periods, more education sessions. When I give education sessions, I try to answer folks' questions first before I even get into my spiel. Even if it doesn't have anything necessarily to do directly with what we're talking about right here per se. You might be curious about the wildfires. Still something that pertains to our environment, because unfortunately when we get those wildfire days from Canada or from California or wherever else, we get the coded days that are in the city, but just think, what is the atmosphere like in the mall? It's way worse than it normally is. And so, everything, is related. And so, just doing those things more, continue to do those things more, because I think we do them already. And just working with good people like you starts with the community and community organizations to tell their story. And that's in part why it's important to work together, because of the stories, and then you can see the commonalities, and then you can start to pull out strategies from commonalities and attention grabbers. Hey, look at this. Did you know that everybody, like you said, 1 in 20 people, unfortunately, like you could start to pull like, whoa, we could start to, amplify our voice.
Exactly, Devon. And that's why I'm happy to have you here. I'll definitely be inviting you on, because I think that what you present to us is a series, and I hope to use your podcast to share with other African American males or males of color. I do speak Spanish, and I do have some other, Puerto Ricans and Mexicans in our community, because unfortunately our community isn't cohesive. So everyone is just kind of wandering around separate. And you present an opportunity to bring a collective where everyone can identify and relate, as well see that actions can be taken, see the actions you've taken, and trust and know that this process is the best process to work. So as always, I'm thankful for your time today. I hope and look forward to us creating a series on which you present, because I would like to highlight and share with others your work so that they can be drawn to you in the Mon Valley. But even if we have some in the Appalachian region who just don't know how to get at our African American or male persons of color, so that they can get to the table, because we very much need their voices and their presence. If any, it's a we thing, like you said. It's all about we. And my father taught me that at a very young age. He said, nothing is about I. He said, when Africans speak, they never say I, they say we. We are hungry. We must eat. We have an issue that we must solve. And like you said, we can do it. We can do it. Clean climate action now, clean air now, clean water now. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.